LBC. Call 0345 6060 973.
7 minutes before 8, we might try to return to our conversation about Lord Geidt in just a moment, but as I said earlier, why it's a crime for a British Prime Minister to see if rules can be tweaked to help the British steel industry defies me. That's what I would have thought the British government should be doing, but maybe we'll return to that. Let's get into the conversation. Our Small Business Minister and London Minister, and obviously Conservative MP Paul Scully, who joins me now. And it's the latter of your ministerial posts I'd like to turn to first, if I could, Minister. London Minister, we are, 4 days away from a series of rail strikes that are so important to Londoners, commuters and the economy. Have you got a final word to those intending to strike? Morning, Minister.
Morning, Nick. Absolutely. Please just get round the table. Or what? If you strike, you risk other businesses, other people's livelihoods, but also the rail system up and down the country, including in London, because we are at a point where we're trying to get people back into work, and any it's fragile. If you just any excuse to stop people travelling really does affect the fare box and the financial viability of the rail services. And we don't want to risk rail jobs. We don't want to risk anybody's jobs. So please get around the table. It's not helping anybody. What I would also call, though, is assuming that the rail strikes do go ahead, that in London the Mayor lifts the congestion charge and stops non-essential roadworks on those strike days to make it easier for people to go about their business and get into work.
I was going to explore that with you, actually. You are too young, but I recall in the days of rail strikes in the past, they actually arranged parking in some of London's larger parks, Hyde Park and everything, and all parking bays were suspended because, I think it was under Mrs Thatcher, they wanted to make it absolutely plain that if a bloke or woman does their best to get to work, we're not going to charge them. Obviously, you're in support of that, and indeed the president of the AA is saying congestion charge should go. Would you go as far as that, and even ULEZ charges as well, Minister?
Yeah, absolutely. On strike days, I think that's absolutely appropriate, and I'd expect the Mayor to look at that and to respond positively to that. And indeed, the Royal Parks is something that I've discussed with other ministers. It's not up for us to say that, unfortunately, because it devolved power. But nonetheless, it's absolutely right that we do everything we can to help commuters, to help people get into work, because in a cost of living crisis, the best way to tackle that situation is to grow the economy, and we can't do that if we are affected by such strikes.
You've referenced the cost of living crisis. There is again a growing chorus for there to be some kind of tax cuts for people, particularly at the lower income end, although Michael Gove, your colleague, refused to rule out a delay of 2 years to tax cuts. What do you think the situation should be, Minister?
Well, I want to get back to being a low tax government, and trusting people to spend their own money. However, we put £408 billion into the economy over COVID. That does give us 408 billion reasons to get this next bit right, to make sure that the gains that we had protecting livelihoods and businesses don't get lost in these headwinds that are with us. Nonetheless, though, there are some tax cuts that are still going through, whether it's the air travel duty, air passenger duty, the 5 pence off fuel duty, albeit that that's obviously got swallowed up by massive global pressures. But importantly for businesses and growing, the super deduction on capital investments, and for individuals, the changes to national insurance thresholds, which they'll actually see many people, something like 80% of workers will see more money in their pay packet next month when that kicks in.
Does the Prime Minister need a new ethics advisor? Do we need a replacement to Lord Geidt? What do you say, Minister?
Well, I think what we will always do, whatever happens, is we'll always want to and expect the high to keep to the highest standards of public office, because when we take the job as ministers and indeed Prime Minister, that's what we take on.
There's some rather low moments over recent months, so I wonder if we need a new man or woman in post, Minister. What say you?
Well, in terms of ethics advisor, there's a number of questions that have been raised by Lord Geidt's resignation letter, and it's right that Number 10 reflects on that and works out the best way to keep that regime as effective as possible.
Lastly, your potential colleague from Wakefield, the by-election, has said voters should trust politicians following the former MP's conviction for sexually assaulting a boy because, quotes, we still all trust GPs after the conviction of serial killer and GP Harold Shipman. How wise were those words, in your view, Minister?
It's not. Well, it's not a comparison I would have made. It's the first I've heard of that, to be fair. But and I wouldn't have made that comparison. But in terms of trusting politicians, I think you have to look why people get into politics, and the vast majority of my colleagues on either side of the house do this for the absolutely right reasons, to do the best for their constituents in the country. They disagree on how to do it, but they do it for the right reasons.
Paul Scully's constituency is Sutton and Cheam, is also Minister for London and Small Business Minister. Thank you for appearing on the show. 2 to 8 is the time. Charlie's in Abbey Wood. Charlie, the Lord Guyt affair, how big does this go on your radar? Good morning.
Hi, good morning, Nick.
Yes.
Thank you for having me on the show.
Thank you. I think you're a first timer. Good to have you on board, sir. How big is the Lord Guyt story on your radar this morning?
In all honesty, not really a big concern to me at